Hey guys, EDDBUD here and welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a rundown of the carbon plated running shoes released in 2020 so far. So with the majority of the faces of running shoe manufacture releasing their carbon plate running shoes finally to the masses, I thought it a good time to give a rundown of all of the different models and look at some of the similarities and the differences between them. It certainly did take a while for some of these shoes to get in the hands of runners out there, mainly due to the lockdown situations all across the world. So today we'll take a look at some of the shoes released recently from Asics, Nike, New Balance. We'll have a good look at the various attributes of each shoe and what separates each one from another. We'll start with upper as per usual. So the Asics Meta Racer here certainly got a very similar upper to that featured on the Adidas Adizero Pro. They've gone with these very light mesh uppers, I think in a bid to actually stop moisture from being absorbed by the upper. Most of them are just one-piece mesh uppers on these shoes with perhaps a little bit of extra padding around the heel, purely for comfort. The upper on the Adizero Pro really is very light. So breathable you can see through it. In fact, if you flash a light through it, it just comes straight through. Both uppers on those shoes are very flexible. It seems like a real theme on some of these high-end race shoes to have an almost see-through but very strong upper. Same again here on the Atom Knit on the Alpha Fly. Apparently they shape the mesh and then steam it so it stays in the same position. You can take the cardboard piece out of here and it just stays exactly where it is. Everything's very flexible apart from that section in the heel. There's quite a considerable counter there. But I think they've tried to minimise the weight in the upper as much as they possibly can to allow a little bit more weight in the midsole. There's loads of additional foam there, and of course the introduction of the Air Zoom pods in the forefoot. Got to make up the weight somewhere, I suppose. I think it gives the manufacturers a little bit more weight to play with perhaps. They want to try and keep the shoes down in terms of weight if they're going to be used for racing. I view the Saucony upper as something kind of in the middle, a little bit more towards a traditional running shoe upper. Don't get me wrong, it's still very light, it's still very breathable. I think it's probably in response to some runners really not liking the vapor weave that's used on the Next Percent. This really isn't everybody's cup of tea. I think some people find it a little strange, a little unfamiliar perhaps. I know of a handful of people that really didn't get on with this shoe because of the upper. But you've got to say the success and performance gains from this shoe really do speak for themselves. I think the idea with this stuff was to stop the upper absorbing any moisture whatsoever. Interesting that Asics really do make that a big selling point to the Meta Racer. I mean, you've got that port at the front here, and then they took out some of the upper at the back of the heel in two places there to help moisture escape and just to make the shoe that a little bit more breathable. I'd say the uppers on the Carbon X and the Saucony Endorphin Pro are really quite similar. That was the first thing that struck me when I took this shoe out of the box. I remembered back to a year ago when I first got the Hyperion Carbon X. Which is best, you may say, in terms of upper? I think it's very much down to the runner and what you require, what your personal preferences are. I think some people will no doubt like the more conventional uppers featured on the Adizero Pro and perhaps the Asics Meta Racer. They feel more like race shoes, perhaps race flats. Some people might even prefer the upper on the Saucony Endorphin Pro. Just feels more like a training shoe. I mean, so many records have been broken in the Next Percent of recent time that you can't really discount that upper. I think one major factor that you have to consider with any shoe that's got some sort of plate in it is the lockdown. You've got to have a really good lockdown to really engage that plate on toe off. I think some of the shoes that we've looked at already today do that better than others. If that's what we're going to look at as the main factor for upper, then I'd probably say the Adizero Pro's actually got the best lockdown over the top of the foot out of all of them. Coming in a close second, the Alpha Fly really does grip the top of the foot. Once you're in this shoe, I've experienced absolutely zero heel slip. Really is quite wondrous. So on today's comparison, I think these two are the top shoes in terms of upper. Midsoles next. Since the introduction of copolymer chemistry within midsole foams, the midsoles have certainly got much lighter. They've got larger, though not all manufacturers are using Pebax based midsoles in their running shoes. Nike and Saucony are certainly enjoying huge demand right now in terms of the success of the Next Percent, the Alpha Fly and also that Endorphin series. The foams used in those shoes display incredible flexibility and elastic properties, but they also have very low weight, they're very strong and have a huge energy return. But still, people seem transfixed by this idea of carbon plates in these shoes. Even to the point where at one stage, lots of people were calling for them to be banned. Many times I've seen people suggest that the carbon plate is the most important thing in these shoes, but I think it's a real misnomer. On reading some significant academic study on that subject, I found that it really is down to the midsole foams. They provide the greatest boost in terms of efficiency, though I think it is going to be down to any individual that uses a specific shoe as to what they get out of it. Not everybody's the same. Everybody has a different running style, and certain things are going to work better for some people than others. I think the midsole foam has a far more important role in providing that efficiency to the runner. It's very clear that some of these foams now really decrease fatigue over longer distances. It enables us to eke a little bit more performance out of ourselves. I found it very interesting that a lot of reviewers of the Adizero Pro said that they felt the carbon plate was kind of missing. It wasn't really there. It didn't feel as prevalent as in other shoes. I think they're kind of missing the point there. This plate's been engineered so that it only bends a certain amount. I found this shoe fantastic on my initial runs. As I say, some things work for some people and not others. When we look at the Alphafly midsole and air unit implementation here, they really are fringe kind of technologies. I mean, this shoe worked fantastically well for me in my half marathon time trial a few weeks back, but was that the midsole foam and the carbon plate, or was it also down to the air zoom units in the forefoot of the shoe? I think the Endorphin series from Saucony meets it somewhere in the middle. It's obviously got that P-Bax based foam and a carbon plate there as well, but I found the implementation of the foam in terms of those beads that have been crushed together create a far more stable underfoot feel. I mean, I ran for 15 miles in this shoe a few weeks back on my long run, and afterwards it felt like I'd run 3 miles. I think it's all about the foam carrier of the plate that actually makes the difference. And as such, for midsole, for me, this one really sticks out. I mean, we've seen people use this shoe for 5k road races. Ingebrigtsen used this over in Norway, a few months back. So I don't think we can completely discount it as a shoe you can use for any distance. I'm not sure I'd pick the Saucony Endorphin Pro though for a low distance like that. Again, there's personal preference. The Asics Meta Racer for me sticks out as the odd one out here. You've got a partial plate that's bottom loaded, so very different implementation. Obviously the flight foam used in the midsole here is lighter than the standard stuff that they would use, but appears to be far more resilient. But what do we know about flight foam and energy return? It's not really clear. This is as close to a race flat as you're going to get, really. I know some people love it. I'm still a little undecided. Of course, those P-Bax based midsoles do come at a price. The Vaporfly and Alphafly series from Nike and the Endorphin series from Saucony are the highest priced shoes that we can get right now. The price just is going to be out of range for a lot of people, especially in today's economic climate. I think it's very interesting that a lot of reviewers did prefer the Saucony Endorphin Speed over the Pro. Why was that? I mean, the Pro's got a lighter upper, you've got the carbon plate, yet loads of other people preferred the Speed. That is that little bit cheaper. The Speed's certainly less rigid than the Pro. Is that something to do with it? Both of them though do have the same midsole foam. Incidentally, over my 10-mile test recently, which shoes, you may ask, did I run the fastest times? The Adidas Adizero Pro and the fastest in the Alphafly. Very different shoes. What do I enjoy best for midsole? I know it's heavier than the next percent, but to me it just feels way more stable. Outsoles next. What's a great race shoe without a brilliant outsole as the icing on the cake? I'm loving that carbon rubber on the Saucony Endorphin series. It's proving really durable and really does provide some great traction. The Adizero Pro has similar levels of durability. We all know how durable Continental rubber is. Grip is tried and tested. We know that from many of their shoes over the recent years, and really fantastic in wet conditions too. The next percent from Nike is now known to be very durable, as I documented in my recent durability video. I will place a link to that at the very end of this video. Sadly, the Alphafly has shown quite early signs of wear in the forefoot. Thank goodness though that the rear of the shoe is holding up much better than the Vaporfly 4% Flyknit outsole did. The Meta Racer's got a different take again on all of this. It's almost like a foam rubber through the forefoot and midfoot, and then some small sprinklings of rubber back here. We really don't know how this one's going to hold up over time in terms of durability. I'd suggest that the Saucony Endorphin Pro and the Adizero Pro from Adidas are probably going to hold up the best over time in terms of durability. I think they've got the best all-round grip and traction there is going, regardless of the weather conditions that you might be using them in. Again though, we see that the savings within the upper are transferring to the midsole and the outsole of these race shoes. What do I find best in terms of the outsole? The Adizero Pro. I think if you're racing in a shoe, you haven't got loads of time, have you, to put into the shoe to say, yeah, this is going to be really durable, this is the one I want to use for my race. You tend to think, I'm going to go with something that I know works. And Continental rubber, we know that it holds up over time. We're going to talk value now. I know that's tough to do when these shoes cost so much. As the manufacturers implement carbon plates into their shoes, it does seem to raise the price considerably. £260. It's the most expensive of running shoes that's been released thus far. And it's still exceptionally hard to get hold of. Just very low availability of this shoe, certainly stateside and in the UK. I know there are new colourways of the Next Percent set to come out, but at the moment it is unavailable. Still the most second expensive shoe that you're going to find. But we know it works. We know that this shoe on a road race is one of the fastest out there. Certainly one of the lightest, that's for sure. Obviously the other shoes coming quite a bit cheaper. £190 for this Saucony Endorphin Pro. Not really that available either. The Meta Racer and the Fuelcell TC, round about 180, and then the Carbon X and the Adizero Pro, round about the 160 mark. So with lots of options in that lower price bracket, which presents the best value? I'd certainly say the Endorphin Pro lessens that fatigue over the greater distances. We've got that Pebax foam, and if we're going on foam being the chief factor here, then this one hits the target. I mean, you're talking £70 cheaper than the Nike Alphafly Next Percent. The Meta Racer and the Fuelcell TC really are polar opposites here. A firmer and lower stack height in the Asics Meta Racer, and that highly cushioned midsole in the TC. A much more substantial upper though in this one. I think the TC could certainly be used for training and racing once we get back to that again, but 180 is a huge amount of cash. If we are saying that midsole is the most important factor here, I think with the Saucony Endorphin Pro only £10 more than those two shoes, this presents better value. I think the Carbon X from Hoka, with its very rigid midsole and EVA foam, misses the point a little bit here with the carbon plate implementation. It just didn't seem to catch on, that shoe. The Adizero Pro from Adidas seems to be taking its own slightly cheaper route, the path less travelled you might say. We know that Boost foam, and regardless of what other people might say, Boost is all the way through the midsole here. We know Boost has got some decent energy return, and they've used that specialised carbon plate. Though we know energy rods are incoming on that other shoe. If we're talking value though, the Endorphin Pro does seem to hit all of the targets. There's a lot to talk about there, guys. What are your opinions on this trend in terms of carbon plate implementation into high-end race shoes? Which of the two factors do you feel is most important? That carbon plate or the midsole foam? Let me know in the comments below. A musical film interlude. Recently I've been watching a film I haven't seen for a few years, which is all about Elliott Smith. It's called Heaven Adores You. Really is worth checking out. It doesn't get too morose about the details surrounding his death, but does show you some of his early life and how he progressed in terms of his music through Portland through to New York and LA. There's some great stuff in there, a few unreleased tracks, and you get a feel for the places that Elliott kind of developed his music and became a superb artist. So do check that one out. Thanks for watching through to the very end, guys. I do appreciate it. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and click the bell for notifications of when new videos are launched. It also helps the channel out a huge amount if you give this video a thumbs up like and share it with your running buddies. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you